Am I a hero?
Am I a hero?
We're here to challenge your definition of a hero.
All right, here we are. 10,000 Heroes podcast. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. I'm excited to introduce this episode. Encore, I know we shouldn't pick favorites, but I had particular resonance with your conversation with Pete Maynard.
Oh,
I love that guy.
I'm so happy to hear that. He's amazing.
And I just thought his kids in the background goofing off the whole time just added texture to the whole thing, added context. I'm super excited for people to hear this. I think you guys stumbled upon such an interesting continuity from this very early question about what is unique to being human and what is also uniquely alienating and miserable about being human, and our ability to carry symbols of our environment in the form of language, communicate that with each other, how special that is, and how it opens this window for abstraction and for a type of reality that's not so connected to the consequences of our environment. How that simple little disconnect, if we don't manage it skillfully, can create some pretty profoundly disturbing results in our day-to-day reality. And I don't think you guys did this on purpose. Maybe you did. You sat down and planned it out. But the way this came full circle by the end, I think the listener is going to be delighted. It doesn't arrive. I'm not going to promise any answers to the meaning of life here, but certainly a really sincere, honest inquiry by both of you. And I'm impressed, can I just say? And I want to say something else. I think your voice sounded particularly silky smooth. Ooh. On this podcast. It was really got into that kind of soul radio host / NPR that you just hit the zone vocally. I was loving it the whole time. So I've gassed it up enough. I hope I didn't oversell it. But this guy, Pete Maynard, I've never heard of him before. I don't know how you got introduced to him, but he won me over for sure.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you for that introduction. I just wanted to make one little comment, not related to today's show particularly, but before we go on, I discovered a website. You may have heard of it. You know, I'm kind of late to the technology game. It's called Twitter. TWI.
I've heard of this.
Yeah, there's 2 or 3 T's in there somewhere, and it's a way for people to engage with us, not on the air. And I've been feeling we've had maybe over 10 episodes now. I want to get some feedback from our listeners. I want to know what's changed them, what they like. And so I created this Twitter handle account that people can then tweet us or tweet us.
I want to be tweeted.
Yes. People can tweet us on Twitter and then we can know what they think.
Yeah. Excellent. Yeah. I know you're behind the technology curve. You were cloistered in Stanford all those years.
That's right. And all we did at Stanford was farming. So
that's right. Organic. That's famous for organic farming.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. That's exciting. So you're announcing our entrance into the Twitterverse.
Yes. And I'd like to tell you the name. So Please for everyone who's listening, they can write to us. So the name is 10,000 Heroes Pod.
At 10,000 Heroes Pod.
That's right. And there's no comma.
Okay. Just roll
10,000 Heroes Pod. That's what I got.
Cool. And maybe we'll even throw some content up there so to help people find us and find their way to us. All right, folks, really please do enjoy this episode. I think you will. And then hop on Twitter and let us know what you think.
You know, there's like so many people, they have all this money, you know, they've dedicated their lives to it, but they don't feel successful or happy because they have no concept of what wealth is to them, of success. So they're just always comparing themselves to some sort of billionaire, and you know, they're just there's just no end. You know, there's just no happiness. But that insight, which I had a long time ago, seeing people operate in capitalist society, is true for all of us. You know, like whether you're playing the violin or you're like learning how to track wild animals, or you're just trying to make money, if you don't have a concept of what success looks like, you'll never feel successful.
How ironic that we have to come to that in our culture. Like, you would think it would be an innate, it would just innately be within us, right? Like happiness, that we would just know what it is as human beings, but we have to like spend our whole lives searching for it.
Yeah.
It seems so, I don't know, so counterintuitive. I mean, I guess having spent so much time out in the wilderness and watching, just, I don't know, I guess animals live in the moment, in the present, right? Nature seems to just bring you to that space that you just live in the moment. And watching all the other animals on the planet, it's like they're not on a search for meaning or happiness. They just are. I don't know. It's weird to me that we as humans have to like spend our whole lifetime searching for meaning and happiness and purpose. It's just weird.
Yeah. I agree with most of that, and then I have all these questions that come in. So part of where my mind goes is different cultures have different supports for this process, and I think maybe our culture hasn't had a lot of support, and maybe other cultures did a little bit better. I mean, there's the mental infrastructure. There's all the mental tools for how to look at your life in different ways, how to be in the moment, how not to be in the moment, how to use the biological apparatus we've been given in a way that's constructive and not self-destructive, which I think, I think it's clear from looking at our society that many of us are using this incredible divine, or maybe just mathematically unlikely object, which is the brain, to destroy ourselves, to ramp up stress. There's all that where we could be doing exactly the opposite. It could be liberating ourselves. And the same with the body. Like so many of us, and that's what like kind of Katie Bowman's work is about. There's just we're like using our bodies against ourselves. We're spending all this time messing with our bones and our joints and our muscles, or not using them properly, which is just like that. I'm pretty sure that a lot of like more indigenous style cultures, it seems clear that they had that one a little bit better dialed than we do. I don't know. It's hard. It's kind of hard for me to know that. But my question about that. Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
My question about the animals. So you've spent a lot more time in the wilderness than I have, and I have no doubt of that observation. But I wonder if the level of presence they have and the level of happiness that they have seemingly without struggle, if that's something that, due to our struggles, just due to this whole process of having to investigate it, having to go slowly, having to learn it, we're eventually we have more potential. Like we might get to some place that's even more in tune or streamlined than they did, because we're so self-reflective and we're putting in work. Or do you think the highest place we can get is where they already are?
Yeah, well, I think we have to go back and ask, are we as humans, are we part of the animal kingdom? There are many that would dispute that observation. Like, no, humans are separate from the animal kingdom. We are something different. Are we? I'm not sure. Like, I agree with you that humans have a potential beyond what we observe in the animal kingdom, but at some points in my observations, I question even that, like, because I've seen some pretty amazing behaviors by animals in the natural world that give place in my mind to the idea that maybe they are, maybe when humans aren't around, they also have the capability of achieving something more than what we give them credit for.
Wow. Okay, so this is a great moment for me to introduce you. Ladies and gentlemen, dear listeners, this is Pete Maynard. He's a friend of mine, and I'd like for you to describe kind of what you would call your career or your special insight relating the wilderness. If you can, I think you could do a better job than I can. And then maybe I can get you to tell some of these stories about these animal behaviors that you've seen.
I'm constantly on a search for something new, and so that's kind of my specialty is searching for something more that humans perhaps we've missed in our modern day culture. And so I would just call myself a searcher. Yeah, I'm an herbalist. I guess maybe that would be the way I would describe myself. I love plants, in particular, medicinal plants in particular, and they really call to me. And I love spending time out amongst plants in their natural habitat. So maybe that would be my specialty. But aside from that, my bigger dream and passion is just one as a searcher, searching for greater meaning, a new way of existence as a human species, I guess.
Beautiful. And one of the reasons I wanted to have you on this show is about the work you've done with others, I think particularly kids in the wilderness. Could you just give us the framework a little bit of what you used to do there? I want to get really more stories later, but just to outline that.
Yeah, so I worked for a program. I won't name the program because I don't have their permission, but we would take at-risk teens out into the wilderness for 6 weeks at a time. And these were mostly inner city kids with quote unquote behavioral issues. And we would teach them primitive survival skills. And they would coexist with us in the desert, southwestern desert, for that 6 weeks. And pretty much most of them did not know that they were coming to this program. A few of them did, but most did not. And so there was a whole range of human emotions to start out with, mostly anger at their parents and a lot of confusion about what they're doing there. And then they would proceed to work through those emotions. And usually they could work through those emotions within the first 2 to 3 weeks. And then after those first 2 or 3 weeks, it's like a light switch would turn on for them, and they realized that they could actually do this. And
okay, wow.
And then the next
I've got it.
The next 3 weeks. Yeah, go ahead.
I've just got to highlight. So they get there, and I'm thinking like a kind of espionage extraction process. Like they know nothing about it. They're like blindfolded or something, and then they get to this desert, and they're like, "Is that?"
I know it sounds insane. Yeah, in some cases, yes. Not to the extent of being blindfolded, but an escort service would sometimes be called in for young men specifically, and the escort service would show up at their home at like 2 a.m. and then escort them to the airport in their pajamas sometimes and transport them. Those were extreme cases, but then they would transport them via airplane to our office in the desert. So the office is actually in a big city, and then we would explain to them what's happening while they're sitting in our office building, and we would proceed to outfit them with clothing and some other bare essentials that they would need. And then we would load them in a van and drive them out to the desert. Usually the drive would take about 3 hours. And that's where we would all start our journey. It was quite remarkable.
Wow. And I mean, I just wanted to give the outline of this and then go into it later, but I find myself unable to do that. So I'm just going to keep asking you questions about it. So
Sure.
I'd love to know what the bare essentials they had were, and then whether or not kind of the structure. Is it a group? How many of the kids are there? How many instructors? Kind of how does it look?
Gotcha. So the bare essentials included a new pair of clothing for every week that they were out there, and then some hygiene essentials as well: toothpaste, a toothbrush. Let me think. And then a journal, so that if they chose to actually keep notes of their daily or weekly experiences, they could do that as well. And a few other things. I don't recall exactly what some of the other essentials were. We did provide them with food. It was all dried food, somebody would prepare their food packs every week, and it was typically just Ziploc bags of like little Ziploc bag of flour, little Ziploc bag of lentils, rice, what most of us would not consider food, right? The first time these kids encounter their food packs, they're like, I can't eat this. This is not food. So that was part of the learning experience. But back on point, they would also be in a group of other kids. And so what would happen is we would drive these teens out and then drop them in with a group of other teenagers that had already been out there for anywhere from 1 week to going on 6. And so that was part of the anxiety that these kids experienced, was now they're going into a group of other teens that they have, they've never met. They don't know anything about them. And so those first few days are really tough. And our role as staff was to, just mostly give them a safe space that they could come to us and feel safe, essentially. That was our main task, was to keep these kids safe. Safe from themselves, safe from each other, and safe from the environment that they find themselves in.
Wow. Okay, so there's 2 directions I want to point you in. One is what you mentioned earlier about learning from animals through these encounters of kind of some possibilities that may mirror our own possibilities. And the other is more about how these kids would transform and kind of in what direction. So I'll let you choose.
Yeah, I'd like to go because of the experiences I had in the wilderness. I spent 2.5, almost 3 years working at this program, and in that time I spent probably well over 365 days sleeping out under the stars. So some of the equipment that we as staff carried, we carried everything the students had and a little bit more. We had a medical kit. We had a communication device, which was a sat phone, and that was about it. So and toilet paper. We did have toilet paper as a hygiene product, which the kids loved. And then we would one of the really one of the pillars of the program was that we as staff are no different from these kids. We are the same, and to show these kids that we were the same as them, we specifically we made it a point to not have better food than them or better gear or we were all the same. We didn't have tents. Starting out in the program, we didn't have sleeping bags. We just had a Army surplus wool blanket, and an Army surplus poncho. And these items we then used they were multi-purpose. So the poncho was one, it was used to keep us dry when it rained. But two, we also made it into a shelter, a personal shelter every night. And so when we would get to a place where we decided that we were going to spend the night, we would try to find a rock or a stick or a tree and tie one corner of the poncho up against the tree and then spread out all the other corners, and that was our tent. We would, if it was going to rain that night, that's where we'd spend the night, is under our individual ponchos. So we were very careful not to place ourselves in a position of we're the staff, you're the students. We really wanted to maintain this sense that we're all the same. We're all in this together. We're all the same, and let's get through this together. So, I guess that's the direction that led me in my life to really pay attention to what was going on around me, and not only to the kids, but in a wilderness setting, to the animals, to the plants, and more specifically to what was going on inside of myself. Because when I entered that program, I needed that program just as much as the kids did. I was emotionally and spiritually sick, and spending 2.5, almost 3 years out there transformed my life in drastic ways.
Wow. So one of the things that comes to mind when you say all that is I'm really interested in awareness. All kinds of techniques we use to develop awareness, all kinds of benefits of having heightened awareness in these different areas. It sounds like that's something that really must have come online for you. You know, and you're talking about external awareness, like awareness of the environment you're in, of these other people, the animals, the plants, but also this inner awareness. How did that emerge? What were the signs of that? Or how could you feel that developing? Could you feel yourself getting more tuned in or having this sharpened awareness over time?
Yeah. So it kind of happens gradually. The awareness part happens gradually. When you place yourself in wilderness and disconnect yourself from all of the technology and all, everything we're surrounded with, including running water, lights. We didn't have any form of any means of lighting up the night except a campfire. So when we got to a campsite and the sun was down already, we had to really work fast and furious in order to get a campfire going. We only used friction fire as a means of lighting our campfire. So if we weren't able to produce fire via the means of friction before it got dark, then most of the time we wouldn't have fire at night, and so we would just exist in the dark of night. Mostly we'd go to bed. Sometimes, well, if we couldn't make fire, we wouldn't eat supper. So fire was critical, and that was part of the other pillar to the program, was that these kids don't need consequences placed upon them by the staff or by external means, because nature provides those natural consequences. If these kids want to be lazy, for example, or they don't want to take care of the few things that they've been gifted, or that actually their fire set they'd prepared themselves, their friction fire set. So if they chose to not take care of it and to lose it, then nature taught them the consequence of that. And that was, well, we don't have a means of making fire, therefore we're not going to have fire. We're not going to have light at night. We're not going to have the warmth of the fire, and we're not going to be able to eat food. And so it was these cycles of natural consequences that nature provided us that really started those inner workings of, oh my gosh, If I don't work in the natural cycles that nature provides, if I don't work with that, then life is going to get really, really, really uncomfortable for me. And so that was the realizations, or what we called awakening, that started the process of self-discovery. And so for me in particular, being out there for weeks at a time, it would take a matter of, I would say, 2 or 3 days for this light switch to be turned on. The other aspect to all of this is when you're out in nature, out in wilderness rather, it's like wilderness has this way of cleansing your emotions. It cleanses even down to your soul, your spirit. I mean, it has this way of just erasing and purifying all of the baggage that you bring with you from the city. Fire in itself is known throughout cultures, throughout eons, as the great cleanser. And symbolically, even to this day, when we want to cleanse ourselves, we write something on a piece of paper and we toss it in the fire as a symbolic means of letting it go. And so we had fire, we had, then we were surrounded by the natural environment, the plants, the animals, the dirt. We didn't have anything to sit on, so we would just sit on rocks or the dirt on the ground. And then at night, it was just the night sky, and most of the time we were just sleeping under the stars. We wouldn't put up our ponchos or our little shelters because there was no threat of rain. So we would just sleep under the stars and would just gaze at the moon, at the stars all night long. So all of these things combined, it just had its way of cleansing the outer self and the inner self. Well, maybe not so much the outer self. The outer self got really dirty, but the inner self it seems like it would purge us of all of the baggage that we would bring with us. Having said that, there are programs, I can think of one in particular, BOSS, Boulder Outdoor School of Survival in Utah, that they take adults out into the wilderness, and their main task in the first 3 days is to cleanse is to purge, do exactly this, what we're talking about, to purge your mind, your senses, all of your senses. Literally cleanse your senses of all of the city urban baggage that we bring along. And within 3 days, you already feel like you're a new being. It's really quite remarkable. Their whole approach is the cleansing of the senses, including your physical appetite. So they try to eat only what they can find in the wilderness, and that also creates this tremendous cleansing of the physical palate, to where when you pick a plant up or something out of the wilderness and you eat it, you taste things that you've never tasted before in your mouth. It's quite amazing. Excuse me, I'm gonna step out real quick. I've got 4 boys at home, including a 4-year-old. So anyway, so we would attempt to mimic that same effect to really cleanse these kids of all of the baggage that they bring with them.
Yeah, and so is there a correlation between the kind of amount of trappings or technology you bring with you and the slowness of this process of cleansing? I'm just thinking, I did a 3-day solo backpacking trip a couple of years ago, and I was really hoping to get to what you're saying. I've experienced that before in different ways, and to be honest, I don't think I got there. I brought all my dehydrated food. I actually had this kind of nasty surprise in that my stove broke immediately, and so I just cooked everything by building fire, which was
Yeah,
fine.
nice.
Occasionally illegal over the fire line, but I did
Right.
it. But I had a water filter and a sleeping bag and a tent, and I had my phone, which I used to take pictures. If I had gone without those trappings, you think 3 days would have been enough, or like what's the appropriate kind of dosage in order to get this cleansing that we're looking for?
Well, first of all, there's a lot of shows out there right now that have become quite popular, and in wilderness survival, and to do this correctly, you need to prepare yourself, right? But yes, I would answer your question and say yes. The I think there is a correlation between what you bring with you and how quickly and effectively you can cleanse yourself of all of these trappings, the baggage essentially that we carry with us all the time, and most of us don't even know that we're carrying baggage. That's the irony. It's so normal to us anymore that we don't even realize that we're not experiencing life as life was meant to be experienced, in my personal opinion, or at least occasionally, right? I think in many traditional cultures, they provided space and time to do these cleanses, right? And they had ceremonies for it, and it was a really big community type ceremony, a ritual rather, and with I think in our culture we've really, I don't know if we've just rendered it like, that it's a thing of the past, it's primitive, therefore it's we're better than that. I don't know what it is about our culture, but we seem to have rendered it obsolete in our modern day culture, and I think it's really detrimental that we do not do these things now. We see religious practices that still have rituals and ceremonies, but I think it's different. I think nature provides something that religion cannot.
Yeah, I have a lot of interest in transformation, in like what can provide people, myself and other people, with lasting transformation. What can catalyze a transformation, and not have it just be an individual peak experience of like, whoa, that was amazing, I had my mind blown. But what can we do that allows us to integrate that knowledge, to integrate that view from the mountaintop, and be able to live differently and better for all of our days after that? So what aspects, you spent 3 years in the wilderness. What at what point did it like go from just being a cleanse to something that really could change you or transform you in a way that you couldn't go back? And like, what was the work that was required to make that happen?
Yeah, that's been my search ever since, honestly. Is how to make it lasting, and I would come back from the wilderness and back, because your senses have been so purged and cleansed, and your senses are so fine tuned in the wilderness. But when you come back into the city, it's almost like you're being shocked by 220 volts of electricity, right? Not in a good way. Your senses instantly are just at peak capacity. They're overwhelmed by the night lights, by the noises, by all the busy activity that the city, the constant activity of the city life, and it's quickly, your senses are very rapidly desensitized, and you find yourself falling back into that same that same old routine. Unfortunately. So having your senses overwhelmed and desensitized by living in the city really makes it challenging to stay in that place, that place of awareness and wholeness. So my the direction that's taken me ever since is searching for a way to create smaller communities, rural in a rural setting, where we can mimic the wilderness setting in our communities, and perhaps have other people that we can hold ourselves accountable to, essentially, but also that we can also provide that moral support and spiritual support, and so that we're not being constantly bombarded and overwhelmed by technology that the city living is constantly, that's the effect of urban living in our modern day. So that in a smaller community type setting, we can separate ourselves from that to some degree, and still get the effect of the wilderness setting. And I haven't achieved it yet, but that's kind of what I'm striving towards.
Okay, yeah, that was my next question. If you'd been successful in that, so then what would it look like? Like in 5 years, what would success look like?
That's something I don't quite know, because I try to live intentionally every day, and living intentionally means not trying to force yourself or force the direction that you're going to take your life. So you strive to live in the moment, and kind of go with where universe or spirit or your heart, whichever direction it leads you in. So, but in my mind, I would say, if my mind were to play it out, I would say, a small community would consist of all age groups: children, young parents, middle-aged parents, and then the individuals of retirement age. And we would all find our role in that community setting, and interact with one another, share food together, hold classes, or some type of mental, physical, and spiritual stimulation of some sort in a group setting. And I know that that's being done in many places around the world. We don't see a lot of it here in the United States, but I know in Europe, for example, they're really making a lot of strides in that direction. And nature, obviously. I stated that we would be meeting as humans, but the natural environment is critical. In my personal belief, given the experience that I have. So a lot of our work would also be interacting with plants and animals, whether that's like a farm setting, or I guess it would be somewhat like a farm setting.
So yeah, I mean, what's curious to me about that, I mean, there's many things, of course, that I love about that vision and I resonate with, and I'm trying to do the same thing, but none of that seems to the same degree of kind of strength and like the raw power of wilderness. So what you were talking about before, even the farming, it's just like, it's great. I mean, it's great to be connected to the earth. Like I love my time farming and gardening, but it's not like wilderness in that way, or that same kind of closeness to, I guess to put it clearly, closeness to death. One of the key aspects of what you talked about is the presence of suffering and the presence of death, and the fact that, there's just no room for entitlement. You don't walk the right amount of miles, or you don't take care of your fire kit, you don't eat. And it's just very, very, very clear. And you realize that, and this is my guess, you can confirm or deny this. You realize that, like, not eating a meal is, sure, it's not comfortable, but it's not a big deal. Getting cold at night it's not something that is actually going to kill you, which is for one night, things like that. That
Yeah.
closeness to death, heightened sensitivity to what life is and the kind of rareness of it. Shouldn't that play a part in this vision?
So a farming setting provides, the full cycle of life, birth and death, but you're speaking more of a personal level, that constantly living close to the fear of death, right? The fear of not having, the fear of being caught in a situation that's really uncomfortable. So, and then working through those fears, that I think is key in the wilderness setting, to helping you work through or have that inner journey. Because fear is, in my personal experience, fear is really one of the key human emotions that prevents us from making inner progress. And so by being in a wilderness setting and experiencing fear, everything you do, you experience the fear of whatever it is, the fear of, being stung or bit, or of not having a fire, not eating, not getting to where you need to be to find water. So, and then working through those fears, and having that overwhelming emotion of, I succeeded. Oh, okay. Oh my goodness. I see that. My 4-year-old is experiencing nature right now and wants to share it. So yeah, I think it's, and when we place ourselves in our trappings, right? In a nice home with running water and hot water when we want it, just comes right out of the tap, and electricity, and and then on top of that, your fridge full of food, then you're so comfortable that you never get yourself out of your comfort zone, and place yourself in those fearful moments that are critical to helping you make that inner progress. So yes, a farm type setting, you're still surrounded by your trappings, literally your trappings, right? It traps you.
Wow. Yeah.
Ironically. So yeah, it's still not ideal. And historically, humans lived nomadically, at least in some places they lived nomadically, and so you kind of had a combination of the trappings, but but now you have to pick up only what's necessary, and you have to move on and move to a new place. And so really nomadic living, and I have friends who are experimenting in the nomadic lifestyle as goat herders here in the US, and I'm curious to hear what they experience in that nomadic lifestyle, if they're able to come to those cleansing of their senses and experiencing wilderness as they live a nomadic lifestyle. But I don't know at this point. I don't have any solid answers about that. But yeah, even a farm setting is going to have its limitations. So, but as a living rural, hopefully you're close to wilderness. My concern is that we're quickly eliminating wilderness and balanced wilderness, I should say, with all of the climate change that's going on. It seems like even wilderness anymore isn't balanced. It's not well. It's not healthy, and so I'm concerned as to what effect that will have on our ability to go out into wilderness and have these experiences. and I don't know what the effect of that's going to be.
Yeah, there's a lot of uncertainty about that. One thing that I had in my mind that I'd love to ask you if you're willing to share. Someone told me to ask you to share your story about Brittany.
Oh. Okay.
I don't know anything more
Brittany.
than that, but
Nothing more. I'm assuming. Okay. Well, I guess I only know one student named Brittany. She was quite a remarkable young lady who she was in as much turmoil as any student I had seen come out to this program. She actually had attempted to do some serious harm to herself, and that was what caused her to come to the program. Her best friend actually took her own life, and she, I don't want to share too many of those details, but she came out to the program, the wilderness program, and she was very distraught, emotionally and spiritually. And man, so many emotions come back just thinking of this young lady. She's a very strong, healthy young woman today, but it was quite a challenging time when she first came out. She actually was one of the students that would communicate where she was at, whereas some of the students wouldn't always do that. So it was quite helpful for us as staff to have a student who would say, I want to harm myself right now, and please help me not to. And so we would sit and communicate with her. I introduced her to meditation and visualizations, which is going one step further than just meditation. And I would actually, get her into a very relaxed state sitting out in the wilderness, and I would talk her through a visualization. But ultimately, week after week, I would see this progress, and this happiness slowly start to seep back into her. And I would ask her, Brittany, where are you? And she's like, I'm still struggling. I still don't understand everything, but I feel happy. She's like, and I haven't felt that in a long time. And it was quite remarkable to see the transformation and have a student talk me through it, because I hadn't experienced that up to that point. To talk to me every day, to say, can I sit down with you and talk to you? And I would go 50 feet from the group and sit down, and she would just pour her heart and soul out to me, and I would pour mine out to her, and it was, I think, coming full circle in our conversation, that's what you alluded to in the beginning of our conversation, is humans have the ability to open our hearts and our souls to one another and share on a very deep personal level who we are, or who we think we are, and what we're experiencing in the here and now, and then to help one another through that. And that was my experience with Brittany, is emotionally and spiritually we were there for each other, and we made it through the program together. And today she's a psychologist. I'm not sure if she's practicing. Last time I checked in with her, she was. As far as I know, she still is. And her endeavor is to help other kids and to share her own personal experience with those kids and tell them that they can do it. They can make it through the tough times. So to really take it to a personal level, there was one of the things we did in this program is when we noticed a transformation happening with these kids, we give them a new name, a trail name is what we called it, a wilderness name, and we offer the students the opportunity to choose the staff member that they would like to offer or to create or to sit down in meditation and discover a new name for the student. And so she came to me and asked me if I would discover her new name. And so myself and one other staff member, we sat in meditation and in conversation, and we felt a name come to us, and we wrote up a description as to what we thought this name was choosing her, why this name was choosing her. And it was Sunshine. The name that we chose was Sunshine Behind the Clouds. And well, it was remarkable because the sunshine behind the clouds was a description of how her happiness was hiding behind her emotions.
Yeah.
Anyway, as the program progressed, she got an opportunity to get another name because she had transitioned and transformed that much. And so she asked some other staff members to name her, and they named her Sunshine. What was it? Sunshine Between the Clouds, I believe. And in the moment that she received that name, it was overcast, and there hadn't been any sun all day. And the moment that she received her name, a small hole opened up in the clouds and just beamed down right on her and the staff members.
Wow.
And those were the type of experiences that we were having on a daily basis with this young student. And there was one other that was just that. Oh, she came to us and she was just distraught, emotionally and spiritually, and just crying. And she said, "I just have to know if there's a God, if there's something out there that cares about me," because she didn't believe that there was. And she said, "And I want to know now." And I said, "Well, that's not necessarily the way that works." You can't force external forces to present themselves to you. But because it was such a personal experience, I won't share the details. But in that very moment that she was so distraught and wanted to know if there was something outside of her that cared deeply about her, that external force presented itself in that moment. And it was just, I mean, to this day, it just sends chills down my back and all over, quite frankly, just thinking about it. But she knew, she could no longer question at that moment that there was something outside of herself that really deeply cared about her and loved her in a very deep fashion. Anyway, it was transformational for all of us that were involved. And for the next week, we would look at each other in the eyes, in a passing moment, and we would just know, like, that transformation had occurred in her. She would just, words were not spoken after that for about a week, and she was just bathing in the emotions of that experience. It was so amazing. And she was definitely one of those students that you never forget, due to the experiences that we had together. And it wasn't like that for every student, but every now and again you'd have one that would come along that would just, you would have otherworldly experiences with them, and that specifically is the wilderness experience that I'm searching for to this day. How do we have those deep, intimate, spiritual experiences, and connect with ourselves, our inner self, and forces outside of us? If we could integrate something in our culture that allowed us to do that in a healthy setting, imagine what we could become as a human race. It would be remarkable.
It'd be remarkable. Thank you so much for sharing that, Pete. I just have one last question. This podcast is called 10,000 Heroes, and one of my goals with it is for every episode to offer, to be able to plant a seed that, if the listeners take it seriously, could seriously transform their lives. And I wonder if there's anything you would suggest or you could offer in that domain as either a one-time experience or a daily practice, or how can people expose themselves more to this very difficult to describe experience that we've been talking around?
Yeah, so I would, in my own attempt to do inner work, if people are searching for an exercise or something that they can do to progress in their inner workings, in their inner journey, the two things that I have found to be the top two things that I have found to be most effective, the number one practice for me that I have to come back to, and man, I struggle with this because both of the top two things are practices of letting go. But I guess in the act of letting go, then you open yourself to receiving. So maybe these are really good recommendations on a general level. So the two things that I consistently practice at letting go, the top one is fear, working through your fears. We build up walls that are protected. These walls are protected by a mirage of fear, and we refuse to get close to them within us, inner walls, I should say. And so the practice that helps me the most to continue my inner workings or my inner journey is to constantly be breaking down those barriers of fear. And one of the practices that I've adopted is just once a month sitting down, bringing out a piece of paper and writing down all of the fears that I experience on a daily basis, real or just perceived, right? One of the real fears, and this is kind of funny, but because most people don't consider it a fear, but we've been trained when we drive in our vehicles not to cross the line, right? Because traffic coming the other direction may hit you or you may hit them.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that you should cross the line. But what I'm saying is that is a real fear. And so that is one that I list on a piece of paper, because you really have to dive deep into yourself to really come up, to bring all these fears to the surface. And I'm not saying that you challenge those fears out in the real world, but I'm just saying write them down, because you'll discover that there are dozens, if not hundreds, of barriers of fear that we have created within ourselves that prevent us from continuing our inner journey. And once you do that, once you get in the habit of writing these fears down, then I sit down and I mentally try to break through those barriers. So the first step is to recognize them, acknowledge them. And then the second one is to do in meditation, really try to visualize sweeping those fears from the inside and release them into whatever your own preference of what you release them into. Sometimes I visualize a burning sun and I burn them up. Sometimes I visualize running water and I throw them in the water. Whatever technique you like to use, the practice of working those fears out from within you and getting them out of your being is so beneficial. For me, it is. And then the second practice that really helps me is the practice of non-judgment. We place judgments on ourselves, on our environment, on other people, our relationships, and our mind is wired to constantly be placing judgment and categorizing, our judgment. So our brain identifies and then categorizes, categorizes, and we don't give any space to, or very little space, I should say, to non-judgment, to allowing a stimulus to come in and to flow through us and exit, instead of trapping it and categorizing it and placing it in a file, in a folder within our brain. So that is a practice that is extremely beneficial as well. If I could practice those regularly, which I unfortunately I can't, I shouldn't say I can't, I don't. We're all in different phases of life. I'm in a phase of life of parenting 4 boys, and oftentimes I don't take the opportunity. I could, but I don't always. But I know something deep inside of me tells me that if I practice that regularly, it would transform who I am. And so I try. I fell and I try again. So that's my challenge to the listeners, is to practice the release of fear and the release of judgment on our environment and on other and on our relationships.
All right, everybody. Thank you for listening. Thank you, Pete, for being on the show and just being willing to go into such depth and vulnerability with us. Once again, I really want to invite some engagement. So we're on Twitter at 10,000 Heroes Pod. Let us know what you think. Let us know what you want more of. I'm really excited to hear from you. And we'll catch you next time.